I'm Isaiah Toney. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm Deputy Director of Oakland Campaigns with the East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy. I've been an organizer for a little while now and based here in Oakland for the past almost 10 years. And this is where I grew up. And it's great to be kind of rooted here in Oakland and get to work with great folks like Liz and Jocelyn and the team at Oakland Rising. Here in Oakland, I support our coalition campaigns around community benefits and workers' rights and labor standards, as well as affordable housing and kind of city budget issues that impact workers and working class folks here in Oakland. Sort of developing an accurate understanding of what conditions folks live in is actually critical for our organizing. So I was really happy to work with Savannah and the team at the UC Berkeley Labor Center on this report, and I'm very excited to get to share about it too, because I think there's some key insights.
Yeah, thank you. And I can you tell us, Savannah, a little bit about the Labor Center? Because I think maybe a lot of folks don't know, or there might be folks who don't know about the Labor Center.
Sure. So I work at the UC Berkeley Labor Center. We are a public service and education institution connected to the UC Berkeley campus and the Institute for Research on Labor and Employment. And we have a number of different programs at the Labor Center. I'm on the low-wage work team with our director, Enrique Lopez-Lira, and we primarily do research on working conditions, especially those facing low-wage workers, people of color, immigrants, women. And we also do policy analysis of labor standards, especially standards designed to raise the minimum wage or other labor policies to really look at, what is the effect that workers would have if we raise the minimum wage? Like how many workers would be affected? How much, would their wages go up? What would that mean for them? And so we do research both on policy, but also technical assistance. We will provide research support or other support to organizations like EBASE, and to help answer the questions that they might have.
So I know this newest report, the State of Working East Bay 2015 to 2019, is the newest edition of this report, right? And could you share, or Isaiah or Savannah, if you could, either one of you could share, like, why is this report important for folks to know about, and the impetus of like its origins?
Yeah, I could start maybe a little bit on my social
media. Go ahead, Savannah.
Media, and it was like you're over your time limit. So I had to get rid of the notification.
Good job, Savannah. Boundaries.
Okay.
Boundaries. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So this report, we wanted to support EBASE. They had done a report like this and published in 2012 after the Great Recession, showing the state of workers coming out of that, economic downturn of the Great Recession. And we wanted to provide kind of another snapshot, another point in time. And when we started working on this last year, actually the only robust data that was available to us was through 2019. And so one of the things was that motivated us to do this was in part limitations of data, but we also wanted to get like a snapshot of like what was work like pre-pandemic, because we plan to do an upcoming report looking at some of these same measures next year, when we'll have new data available from the last couple of years, so we can really say, okay, what effect has the pandemic had on workers in the East Bay? So this report was important to us to both update the work that EBASE had done almost 10 years ago, but also be able to get a snapshot of a time when, at least in theory, the economy was strong. We were 10 years out of the Great Recession, and show that, wow, that's actually not true. Things were quite stark.
That's
even
right. That's
pre-pandemic.
Right. And why do you have anything to add to that, Isaiah, in terms of why this is so important to EBASE?
Yeah, I think a big piece for us is around combating the kind of nonsense narratives that we hear from, from both the kind of business lobby and in particular the kind of landlord lobby in the California Apartment Association. And you know, if you would listen to what those folks say, you know, tenants are doing well and going out of their way to be mean to landlords, when we know that that's not the case anecdotally. And, you know, we actually have the data to back it up and to demonstrate that those are completely nonsensical narratives, that, you know, wages are falling, you know, housing prices are going up, and that's where working people get the pinch. So, you know, I think we have some work to do to kind of work both with decision makers as well, and especially with journalists, to be able to kind of call out those narratives as they get brought up, to make sure that that's not, you know, informing the decision making process that impacts whether or not we're going to have affordable housing, or whether or not the city is going to prioritize, you know, jobs that lead to careers here in the city of Oakland.
That's right. You know, and I think like that narrative is not a new one, right? Like grifting the system is, I've been seeing a lot. Like I've been watching sort of this new narrative, a new spin, I would say, on the narrative, the old narrative of, you know, nonprofits and poor people and, you know, the welfare queen, or, you know, now it's the like the bum ass like renters who are lazy and don't want to pay their rent. And you know, that the victim in this situation is the landlords, is the corporations, is the like big business owners, right? Like, and you know, oftentimes it gets turned around in a way that's like, well, we're suffering, and if we're suffering as a business or as, you know, a corporation, and our profit line is, you know, goes down a little bit, then we're suffering, and that will pass on to everybody else. And so again, it seems like the narrative out there is like, one wants to blame poor people and blame poor people of color, and then also to blame and to also play victim to the situation, right? And to say, again, we're asking poor people to carry and bear the burden of this system, this capitalist system. And I was reading the report myself, and it's what's really great is, you know, I could show folks too as we're looking, and once we're looking at some of the data. Oh shoot, I don't know if I could do this here well, but you know, like some of the things here that's really important is like looking at some of this around how much people are actually making, right? And I think, you know, there was this narrative out there, or there is a real big narrative out there around like, you know, people are making enough money and we pay really well, and our living wage in the Oakland and the Bay is worth enough. And I just don't know how true this is, right? And so I'm wondering if y'all could speak about that, because in your report it says 1 in 4 East Bay workers earned low wages. And before we kind of like jump into that, if y'all could talk about, just clear the air, y'all, the difference between median and average, because I think a lot of people, that's also a way that people use certain words to confuse data, right? Is they'll use median and instead of average, or average instead of median, in order to confuse people. So there's a lot in here that's like median income, median hourly wage, median rent, you know, cost. So if y'all could talk a little bit about what that means first.
Yeah, so we went with the median for most of the measures in the report, in part because the median is the middle. So if you think about like 10 people and they all make a different wage, you're looking at someone who makes something at the low end, all the way at the high end. The median is the middle. What is that person in the middle making? And so we use that instead of the average, because you might have folks who are way up at the high end, who make very high wages, and that might sort of skew your analysis towards that sort of higher end. Alternatively, if you have a lot of folks concentrated at very low wages, it could skew it that direction. So the median tends to be maybe a little bit more reliable.
It's like a
showing
bell.
folks
It's
somewhere
like
in
the
the middle.
top of the bell,
But
right?
across the board, I mean, that this, and even across the board, the median and the average are actually not that different in this report, but we go with the median because it tends to be a little bit more robust to potential, trends being pulled in either direction.
So I just went and pulled up the area median income table for San Francisco Bay Area because I noticed one of the entries on that chart you showed was someone earning about $30 an hour, and I don't remember which sort of family status that was associated with, but it looks like $30 an hour is roughly $62,000 a year. And that's between 60 and 65% of the area median income for one person. So if you're earning $30 an hour, you're not even at median income for one person. And, this, I think pretty clearly shows that there's, a sort of gap in between a cluster of folks making lower wages and a cluster of folks making higher wages. And that's one of the pieces that I think gets skipped over is, that bell is a little flat in part of it, right? And there's a flat plateau on the lower end, and then it kind of peters out towards the higher end. And, if you're one person making $62,000 a year in Oakland, you're not on track to home ownership, right? You may see struggles if the rent goes up or if there's an unforeseen medical expense. And we know that we need to make sure that decision makers aren't scoffing at folks who say I make $62,000 a year and it's not enough to make ends meet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the goal of that chart too is just to show the racial and ethnic inequalities and the gender inequalities in wages. And so you could see at the very end, Hispanic women making less than half of the median hourly wage of a white man at the very end. And so, yeah, the goal of this too was just to show that wages are low and not meeting many people's needs, but also this is particularly a problem
Yeah,
for workers of color.
I really appreciated this report because it's kind of just bringing like data, numbers to what you said earlier, Isaiah, like anecdotally. Like we know this. We know that working class people here in the Bay and in Oakland and in the East Bay are struggling. We've been saying this and we've been calling the alarm for a really long time, right? It's not like anything new. But to see this data in numbers, I think is really telling. The other thing that I really appreciated this, and then I was also like, sometimes how words, particularly in reports, can be deceiving because it's like, it makes it seem when you say, Latina women are making this much money, they earn this much money. It's actually, that's how much they're getting paid. Somebody's paying them this much. They are not like, they didn't go and say, oh yes, I want to make $17 an hour. Please give me this wage, right? Like when we say low wage worker or we use these terms, it puts the auspices on the person as opposed to on the business or on the industries. And so like, this is what, I just want to be really clear, right? This is what they are being paid by either a business or a corporation or whatever, right? Like that the industry is paying people this low wages and white men are receiving via this more pay. And it's not because, this is how the system is set up. So that to me was one of those things like, it's again, like a battle of those words, like an understanding because it puts it on them. It puts it on back. Let's put it back on the business. Let's not put it on us because it's not like I want to make less money. I enjoy struggling. right?
Right.
It's because somebody's not, this industries aren't going to pay it. And, you know, they say all these kinds of things, and some of this stuff is just really crazy to me to hear that. And what's really interesting at this moment is that we're seeing a lot of conversation out there about crime and public safety. And, you know, I think that we often aren't thinking about, like, when you talk to folks who are like, yeah, we want, you know, we know that it is the conditions that people are living in that increase crime. And it's this, but it's like, it gets confusing because the similar words around like grifting the system, right? Being like welfare queen, or being lazy renters. Like some of these things, these words that are getting used out there, I think is really important. And I'm curious if y'all could talk a little bit more about the ability for people, like how much people are making in contrast to the actual cost of living, because we all know it's expensive to live here, but like, let's put that into perspective. And this is 2019, y'all, like the data up until 2019. So if y'all could talk a little bit about that, I would really appreciate to share what your thoughts are about that.
Savannah, you want to go first? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate we were raising earlier about earning versus paid. You know, that like you know, exactly, no one chooses a low wage job. Folks are funneled into those positions through lack of opportunity or social networks, or, you know, various things that we sort of know as broadly this term as occupational segregation, that folks end up in different types of valued positions, not because they choose them, but because of, you know, like social networks and lack of opportunities, things like that. So I really appreciate you raising that. And then on the cost of living piece, yeah, what we did is we compared what the each worker in this survey, we used data from this for the census for this entire report. We compared their hourly wage to what's called a cost of living measure, or a living wage measure, which is put out by the Massachusetts Institute for Technology. And what they do is they look at, well, how much does it cost for housing in a particular area? How much does it cost for a basic food budget? How much does it cost for childcare, transportation, healthcare? They consider a number of expenses for a geographic area, and then they say, okay, if someone was working full-time all year long, what wage would they need to just be able to meet those very basic expenses? And that in 2019 for both Alameda and Contra Costa County was somewhere around $22. And so we looked at how many people actually make that. And that was just to support, you know, one worker on their own. And what we found is that like around 4 out of 10 workers don't even make enough just to support themselves, just their basic daily living expenses. And about half of people, more than half of people, don't make enough to support themselves and a family of 4. And that's even assuming that that person has a partner who's also working full-time all year. And so we know, at least comparing what people make to general cost of living measures, that many, many workers in the East Bay are struggling. And those, again, workers of color, single parents, struggling to an even greater degree.
You look like you're about to jump in, Isaiah.
You know, I think I would just add that you know, a little bit to what you said earlier, Liz, about you know, the conditions people live in, sort of producing you know, what options are available to folks. And you know, the conversations around you know, crimes that poor people commit are always surprising to me, because we know that wage theft actually represents the most number of dollars stolen in the U.S. every year. And that's a crime that employers commit against poor people, right? And so wage theft is when an employer enters into an agreement to pay a certain amount for a certain amount of work, and then doesn't pay someone for that work in one way or another. So sometimes it's the paycheck doesn't come. Sometimes the paycheck is short. Sometimes they try and pay you late. And there's many forms of wage theft. But anyone who's actually interested in putting dollars back in the pockets of people who have the least dollars should be looking at wage theft, and should be, trying to level the playing field for those businesses that pay their workers what they owe them, so that they're not competing with the cheaters that are actually causing deep harm and the largest dollar amount of harm in our communities. And it's tough because there really aren't data on wage theft at the local level, right?
Right.
So we have to kind of rely on both anecdotal data and sort of inferences based on what complaints get filed. But even then, our government has been so lax at enforcing labor standards and protecting workers' rights that employers mostly know they're going to get away with it, right? Or know that maybe they're going to have to pay up, 3 or 5 years down the line, and it's worth it for them to keep stealing from workers.
That's right.
And given how low workers are already paid, that seems like a extremely high priority to us. I mean, these figures don't count wage theft, right? Like these figures are what the worker is owed, not what actually lands in their pockets. So some of these folks, who are making $30 an hour, are actually getting paid based on $25 an hour, right? And I know here at EBASE, that's one thing we're trying to take a look at in the near future, is, how do we make sure employers are paying folks what they committed to?
Right. And I think like one of the things is Oakland Rising and EBASE and other folks that are part of the Oakland Rising Collaborative, we have, when we go and when we look at, for example, when we talk about, let's say like the school district, right? They're about to go into their mid-year budget or mid-cycle budget, and they're going to be possibly talking about cuts, and those cuts mean school closures. And so what does this look like at the end of the day in terms of like, and we know that when with school closures, that means that's leading to like public property, public land that's owned by the public, meaning by our government, right? And is now potentially open for developers to like take over, to try to buy, because we saw that happen after the last set of school closures where we saw developers like actually surveying land. And we do a lot around community benefits, right? And so this happened not only with Howard Terminal, happened with the Coliseum, possibly will happen with the Coliseum moving forward, and then also with OUSD land and with the ports, right? And so EBASE worked a lot around what happened with the Oakland ports and with the military base, the closure of the military bases. And so I'm saying this all to say that we lead towards like community benefits agreements. And always in that piece is how do we get good paying union represented jobs, right? And a lot of folks are sort of like, well, we need to prioritize, the economy first. We need to prioritize making sure that this development is successful, right? And it's like there always seems to be some kind of disconnect that happens in that process where when you're sort of battling up against, the forces that be, whether they be corporations, whether they be, and mostly corporations, right? Let's be real, like who are trying to take over this land, developers, let's say. And then what happens is then it becomes like again, like what I said at the beginning around like the poor working class people have to carry the burden of this development, right? Like for the sake of all. But as corporations and their stakeholders and CEOs continue to walk away with incredible amounts of money. The disparity between like what we're talking about, working class poor people making, and what the CEOs are making. And those are the same people that are putting out like all this messaging and narrative in the media around crime, around rent, around like, you know, like all the things, the same messaging that we've been talking about this entire time. And so like that is good paying union paid, like represented jobs are so important on every level. And I'm wondering, like when I'm looking at this report, for me, it just like kind of solidifies that more and more. And I just wonder, yeah, it's been, when I read this, I was just like, see, y'all, this is what we're talking about. This is why it's so important.
Yeah, I think workers are an important part of the economy, like you were saying, that often don't seem central. And like what Isaiah was saying around wage theft, like that is, you know, billions of dollars that does not get contributed to the community, right? If workers had more income, more earnings,
Right.
they would spend it in their local communities, right? Support their local businesses. So like workers are a really important part of the economy. And all of that theft, wage theft, doesn't end up in their pockets, doesn't go back to support communities. So workers are a key part of that. And absolutely, like fighting for good union jobs, community benefits agreements. There's a lot that's going on in this area, especially around the transition to, you know, a green economy, all of the infrastructure money that's come down from the federal government, a real push to try to get these kind of benefit agreements in place to ensure that we do have good union jobs, good quality jobs for workers to take a part in, because they deserve them, and also because we know it's an important part of contributing back to our communities.
That's right. And I was also looking in this report, y'all, I pinned to the chat the actual link to the report, the State of Working East Bay 2015 to 2019 report. Please go to this and look at it. And actually, I printed it out, y'all, because I'm old school. Also, like, I don't know, I love it.
I've got it over here,
Me and
second screen.
Isaiah old school with printouts, with all my notes. I felt like I was back in school, y'all. But I was but what I was interested too was like looking at the type of occupations that are considered low wage. And this to me was also really wild because I'm like, okay, so this is what y'all remember at the beginning of the pandemic when we went into lockdown, and when we were what is that called, doing the social, what is it, social isolation? No, that's not the word. I'm sorry. Yeah, we were distancing, but we were like quarantining. That's what it is. When we were like everybody was quarantined, but then it was like except essential workers, and I was like, oh shit, that's everybody on this list, except maybe retail. Retail was a little bit like iffy on some of this, but like accommodation. Here, y'all, let me show you this list. Okay, so we have accommodation and food services, healthcare and social assistance, education, manufacturing, right? Administrative, waste management, right? We were willing to like send these people out into the world with this global pandemic, this deadly global pandemic, right? And saying you are essential, but look at their wages, y'all. Come on, right? This is wild to me. Like how we could, like where's our value? I don't know. That was like blew my mind. I knew it's something like I knew this like anecdotally. You just know these things. But then a part of me was just like, wow, this is wild. Like we would be willing to essentially tell these people, bear the brunt of this global pandemic. But you know what? you're gonna be, we're gonna pay you the least. Y'all,
Yeah,
help me with this.
it's wild. So eBay's actually at the start of the pandemic, anecdotally knew, right, that the workers who would be impacted by the pandemic the most would be the lowest paid workers. So we worked with then council member, now Mayor Sheng Tao, on mandatory paid sick leave for essential workers. Particularly thinking about folks that work in grocery stores and other places that can't close during a pandemic. So we were able to get that passed in May of 2020, so pretty early on. And I think, policies like those need to be a critical part of responses to, things like pandemics or other disasters where I think it's easy for folks who want to have a sort of we're in this together approach to forget that people have different experiences and are impacted differently. And when we craft policy solutions, we actually have to look at how people are differently impacted. And those of us that hold up the mantle of equity are always going to be looking for the folks that are most impacted and what policies and solutions can be created to meet their needs. So you're right. It's kind of wild that that we went into shutdowns without having that kind of plan like already in place. There are other countries where people were asked to stay home and then food delivery started to every house, right? Or to almost every house. And as we look at the data from the census that we collected during the pandemic, I think there's going to be another round of policies that need to come into effect to look at the folks that had been building some amount of wealth and then lost it in the pandemic, right? Or who had been on track to kind of develop skills to be able to access careers and were blown off track by the pandemic. So I think this next round of data analysis is going to be pretty critical, and we're going to want to see some new policies kind of get proposed with that info.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking too that the Labor Center had kind of tracked some of this during the pandemic, putting out this chart book of showing what industries were most affected by job loss and unemployment. And it often was, low wage workers in retail, hospitality, and food service, restaurants. And those were some of the workers who were most affected. And one of the things Isaiah was just mentioning is we want to update this report next year. And there was actually a very recent analysis that came out from the census showing that during the pandemic, during this downturn, the government did try to put some things in place, like a stimulus check. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was something kind of helped people get by. Expanded the child tax credit so people could keep more of their own earnings during the pandemic. Food stamp access was expanded. Various social programs were put in place. Those were all rolled back last year. And what we see is that poverty actually went down in 2021 because these initiatives were in place. And now that those have been rolled back, we know that poverty has gone right back to where it was in 2019 and actually is a little bit worse. In fact, child poverty doubled comparing 2021 to 2022. And so I think the pandemic opened up this crisis. We had some kind of government response that at least kept people, above that poverty line a little bit. We've rolled those back and we're kind of back to where we started. And so I think it'll be really interesting to do this next report, like Isaiah was saying, and see where are we now, in 2021, 2022, and how are workers faring considering the instability that we've experienced the last few years.
Yeah, it's so critical for us to be able to look at that, right? Because I think it's like, and again, when you go and kick it with your friends, or you're kicking it with your family, or you're kicking it with your community, these are the things you're going to talk about, right? While we're getting our haircuts, while we're wherever, we're doing all the things that we're doing in the community. And just, and it's the reminders that we have to, that oftentimes like our stories rooted in our lived experiences, like how we live our lives is often it's not real. Like you're just, you know, it's like we get pushed to the side and it's discredited. And so to be able to have the data in front of us, to be able to go to funders, to the government, to our city, to our county, and be able to say like concretely, this is where we're at and this is what we need to do next. This is why we need to do and move these policies forward, I think is really important. And so appreciative of this report, appreciative of the work that will come out. We're hoping, when do you know when you all will have that 2020 to 2023 report or 2022?
So the data from the census is lagged by like 2 years. So we know in November we'll be getting data from 2022. So then we can start working on it after that. So sometime probably, we released this in May last year. Maybe we could shoot for that again, looking at 2021 and 2022. Of course, 2023 won't be available for at least another year and a half. So we're always kind of fighting this data lag, but hopefully sometime in the spring next year, we'll have a little bit more recent data.
Well, appreciate you both. I mean, folks can follow you all on, you know, go to your social media, go to the Labor Center, berkeley.edu for the report. The link is in the chat there. We'll hopefully try to lift it up into our bio as well. So you can click on that there. And also, where can folks, is there any other places that folks can follow the Labor Center, Savannah?
Our website's a great place. People can sign up for the listserv. We do have some social media. Folks can follow our Instagram. We have Twitter/X as well.
And
folks
how
can
about
follow us there too.
EBASE? You know, let folks know where they could follow EBASE and find out more information and what the things that y'all are doing.
Yeah, folks can check out our website, workingeastbay.org. You can also find us on Instagram, Working East Bay, or on Facebook under East Bay Alliance for a Sustainable Economy. And yeah, we love hearing from folks, any feedback, questions, and we've always got campaigns that folks are more than welcome to join us on.
And I just want to name in the chat that Maychen 510 wrote, the report is full of helpful language to talk about the problem of local poverty. Exactly. So appreciative of that. You can follow Oakland Rising, Oakland.rising here on IG. We're on Facebook. We're on the X, the Twitter, whatever the fuck it's called now. And you can go to our website, oaklandrising.org, and please, if you are so inclined to and really appreciate our work and appreciate, you know, Monday meals, like feel free to donate, oaklandrising.org/donate, and you could click the page, click the link, and continue. You could do it on a monthly basis, a one-time donation. You could do it every month. Anything is helpful. And hopefully we can continue work together on building power here in Oakland, in the flatlands of Oakland and the East Bay. So thank you so much, both Savannah and Isaiah, for joining to talk about this, and appreciate all the people who joined and stayed on with us. Bye.
Thank you
Thanks, Liz.
so much.
Thanks, Savannah.
Have a good week.
Bye.